Shalom friends, welcome to the Shiur in Talmud. We're studying Masechet Berachot, Tractate Blessings. We're using the Koren Talmud Bavli edition, as you can see in front, a very beautiful edition with the original text, translation, notes, diagrams, illustrations, photographs, notes, biographies, and more to help us find our way through the Gemara and make it accessible to us. If we're not quite sure what the words mean, we can just check it out on the side and various other things just to help us to understand the Gemara easier, and it shouldn't be too difficult for us to follow through the discussions of the Gemara together. I'm Eliyahu Sher from Chesed Ve'emet. My sites can be found on www.lovingkindness.co. And so we're on Berachot, Blessings. We're on Daf Chaf Amud Aleph, that is page 20, side A. In the edition that we're using, it doesn't look like the image of a regular Gemara, but that's okay. The material is exactly the same, and we know exactly where we are in the Gemara. If at any time you wish to follow along with me as I'm speaking, please do take a look at some of the information on the sides as I'm talking, and it will help to just fill in some gaps along the way. If I'm not expressing it 100% and you might want some further insight, please feel free to follow along on the side by yourself as we progress through the Gemara. Now, in our last lesson, we discussed the idea of the aspect of human dignity and whether or not human dignity overrides certain mitzvot in the Torah. For example, we discussed the issue of a person who has lost something and somebody comes across the item that has been lost, and we have a mitzvah to return this item back to its owner. It's a very important mitzvah. Yet the Torah comes along and tells us that there are certain cases where it is beneath the dignity of the person to return the item for various reasons. One reason could be, for example, that the item itself might be an item which is not appropriate for this particular person to be dealing with, something that is negative. It has a negative connotation to it, and for the person who picks it up and returns it, it's not very honorable. Could also be a case of an elderly person who finds it difficult to bend down and to pick the item up. And therefore, the human dignity takes precedence over the fact that there is a mitzvah to return the lost object. Very interesting, fascinating discussion. And of course, we can talk about it for many, many hours. The concept of to what degree am I liable to return an object back to the owner who has lost this particular object. And the Gemara continued on to another theme. And the theme was concerning the idea of human dignity and so on and so forth. We spoke about the idea of how it was that the generations from before were privileged in that they witnessed more miracles than we do today. Of course, that was said in those days, all the more so today when we relate back to those times where miracles were performed a lot more frequently for people than they are today. And the discussion went with Rav Papa over, we see over here, Rav Papa said to Abaya, what is different about the earlier generations, the miracles occurred. And we saw that at the end of the day, our discussion ended off and said that one thing that those generations had that we don't have today is that they were mesirus nefesh. They performed mitzvahs by giving of themselves completely, no matter what the cost was. And as we saw the story taking place of Rav Ada bar Ahava, that he saw this woman in the marketplace and she was wearing a garment that he suspected contained shatnez. So the question, of course, was, should he remove the garment and embarrass her? Because, of course, shatnez is forbidden to be worn. Or should he just leave her? Well, he was willing to be mesirus nefesh. He was willing to give over himself, self-sacrifice. He was willing to say that even if it would cost me embarrassment in the situation, or it would cost her embarrassment, the mitzvah was so important to him that he was willing to give over, even if it cost him something. And indeed, he was caught out because the particular woman concerned in the story was not Jewish, and she was certainly not liable for wearing this garment that contained this forbidden material, or it was a garment that was highly expensive, and he just felt that it was inappropriate that a Jewish lady should be walking around in such an expensive-looking garment. It was immodest. That was his reasoning. And as a result of that, the sages found him with the amount of 400 zuz. He had to pay her a penalty for embarrassing her, because, of course, we know that human dignity is vitally important. We should do the best that we can, of course, in every situation, never to embarrass a person. So the idea was, since the previous generations were willing to be involved in this idea of self-sacrifice to a degree, it could even cost them something, they were also deserving that miracles would occur to them more frequently than they do to them at that point in time in the discussion of the Gemara, and of course all the more so in today's times. Now we continue in the Gemara. The Gemara says the following: Rav Giddel, Hava Ragil Dahava, Rav Giddel was accustomed, Ka'azel v'yasev asharei tefillah. He was accustomed to go and to sit by the gates of the Mikvah. Well, if he went, then he would sit by the Mikvah. The ladies were going to immerse themselves. Anybody who lives in Israel will surely know, of course, in any area where one lives, but in Israel, one can see it on a very personal level that if one finds himself by a Mikvah where the ladies are immersing, and even if one's going to pick up one's wife, and one is just kind of waiting for one's wife, that you'll find many women will come out and start screaming, and they'll be very upset. What are you doing here by the mikveh? It is inappropriate that a man should be by the mikveh. And you'll explain to them, but you've just come to pick up your wife. And they get very angry and they'll want to report you. Who knows where this discussion can lead to? And perhaps the priest will become involved. These are serious issues. And this is what I'm saying is really, this is what happens. So it's very strange that the story took place, that Rav Giddel, he was accustomed to sitting outside the gates of the mikveh. Omar lahu, they said to him, Haki tevilu v'haki tevula. Tevilu. He would say to the ladies, this is how you should immerse. This is how you should immerse. As they would walk through, he was a competent halakhic authority, and he would explain to the ladies as they were walking into the mikveh exactly the correct process to take in terms of immersion. Omri le Rabbanan, the rabbis said to him, Loka Mr. Mar Yetzer Hara, is the master not afraid of the Yetzer Hara? Of course, the discussion here had nothing to do with whether or not it might be immodest for him to be there altogether. The only man standing around as the woman passed through, it could be something that is quite immodest. But in addition to this, the rabbis pointed out that isn't he afraid that if he's going to hang around over there, that he's going to start thinking certain immodest thoughts. Meanwhile, while he's instructing the ladies of how to immerse, something that perhaps should be done long before they immerse, they should already know what to do. What is he doing there? Instructing them to immerse in a certain way. His Yetzer Hara will get the better of him, and he's going to, that's it. It's going to be all over for him as far as his Yetzer Hara is concerned. Omalahu. So he said to them, Damyan ba'apai ki kakei chivarei. They are comparable in my eyes to geese, to white geese. As far as I'm concerned, said Rav Giddel, when the ladies pass through, I see them in the same way that I would see white geese passing through, and my Yetzer Hara is not affected in any way whatsoever. Rabbi Yochanan, that was the story. Rabbi Yochanan, famous story now, Hava Ragil, Hava Ka'azil, V'yasev Asharei T'vila. Rabbi Yochanan was a very good-looking man, the famous Rabbi Yochanan that we've discussed many times in the Gemara. He was accustomed that he would go and sit at the gates of the mikveh house as the ladies would come through. In fact, as the ladies would pass through, not going in, but as they would pass through coming out. Omar, he would say, he said, Kisalkan benos Yisrael, v'asyan mitzvila, when the ladies, the Jewish people, the Jewish girls, when they leave and they come out from the Tevillah, once they've already gone to the mikveh and they come out now, mistaklan bi, they're going to take a look at me. V'nehevelu zara deshapirei kavati, and they will have offspring that will be beautiful just like me. Those who know the halachot concerning when women go to the mikveh to purify themselves after their menstrual cycle, that they should be very careful that when they leave the mikveh, they should keep their eyes guarded. And the first thing that they should look at should ideally be their husband. That's number one. And if it's not their husband, at least the image that they should see when they come out of the mikveh, other than the fact that they will be greeted by the balanit, the mikveh lady, which is of course appropriate, and so is the halakha. But when she comes out the mikvah, she should be careful not to see any untoward sight. And there we discuss, for example, in that sugya, we discussed the issue that, of course, in those days, especially, it could be quite likely that as she would come out of the mikvah going back, especially hundreds of years ago, that as she'd be walking down the road going back home and her husband wasn't there to pick her up in his fancy car, well, then she would walk down the road and she'd see a dog, or she'd see a pig, or who knows what she would see. Well, the danger of that, of course, is that if she's going to see those sights along the way, when she will be intimate with her husband that evening, a funny thing is going to happen, because the Yetzer Hara has a way of doing this, that the image that will come up in her mind while she is intimate with her husband is this image of the dog that she saw along the way, or the pig, or anything else that is of a negative nature. This, says the Torah, is going to be very dangerous for the nature of the child that will be conceived, because the thoughts that we have at this point in time are going to have a great effect on the type of child that will be conceived. If we think holy thoughts, if we think good thoughts, if we think beautiful thoughts, if we think Torah thoughts doesn't mean that the husband has to chazer, he has to go through the entire Gemara that he was learning that day in Kollel, while he's intimate with his wife, he's thinking about the Gemara that he studied. We don't mean it in the full sense of that type of aspect, but we mean that his mind is occupied with beautiful ideas. And through the beautiful ideas, the holy ideas, he's concentrating on the idea that he wants to bring down a holy soul from the worlds above. Indeed, in this process, in this moment of intimacy between a husband and a wife, both together have the opportunity, as they meditate while they are engaged in this holy act, they have the ability to bring down a holy soul. Let us not forget for a moment that the soul comes from God, the body comes from people, and therefore when they are intimate, everybody's going to bring down a body. But what type of soul is going to be brought down into that body depends highly upon the thoughts that the couple are going to engage in at the time of intimacy. And for this reason, the laws of modesty at the time of intimacy are detailed at great length. Many people might think that this is some sort of a joke, that they think, what difference does it make? Or he should have these thoughts that concentrate on the sexual act and so on and so forth. When the reality is that the thoughts that both of them should have should not just include the love that they have towards each other, but should also include the positive thoughts of bringing down a holy soul. It's almost a moment of prayer, where we are directing our thoughts just as much as we would direct our thoughts at the time of prayer, asking God for our tefillot to be answered, and we direct our prayer in a certain way. So too, at this particular point in time, the couple should engage, although they are dealing with a very physical act, their thoughts should be wandering on holy matters as pertains to kedusha, things of a holy nature, which means that they are praying to God in a certain sense, that God should bless them with a holy soul that will light up the eyes of the Jewish people in the years to come as it is brought down into this world. And of course, in addition to that, they should even think thoughts that relate to the idea of that the child should be a healthy child. The soul should enter the body and all should be well. There shouldn't be any problems, neither on a spiritual level, nor on a physical level. These are indeed powerful thoughts that they should have in mind. So to get back to the idea that what happens here is that Rabbi Yochanan was not only a great sage, but in addition to being a great sage, he was also a very good-looking man. So when the ladies would pass by, Rabbi Yochanan's idea was he would sit there and he would be involved in his studies of Torah. And when the woman would pass by, instead of seeing a dog as their first sight, or instead of seeing a pig as their first sight, they would see the great Rabbi Yochanan, and the image of Rabbi Yochanan would stick in their minds. Again, this does not just mean necessarily the physical image, which of course he was a good-looking man, and therefore that would have a positive idea on the idea of a beautiful-looking child. But more than that, they would see here one of the leading sages of the generation, and in their minds, they would be contemplating that they too only wish to have such a child in the world who will illuminate the eyes of the Jewish people. So this is the idea. In today's times, also in many Mikvaot, there are pictures of some of the greatest sages that might be that are framed on the walls of the mikvah, not the mikvah itself, but outside in the change rooms and things like that, so that when the women are entering and when they're leaving, these are the images that remain in their minds, that they are holy people. And I'm talking, of course, of great, great men who are accepted around the world throughout all the generations. And when the lady sees this particular man, these are the thoughts that will be on her mind. She will be wishing that her child can also be a great Jewish person who will light up the eyes of the Jewish people. So Rabbi Yochanan was sitting there, and he would say, the reason that I sit there it had nothing to do with Rav Giddel. Of course, Rav Giddel, he didn't really give a reason. He just says, basically, I told them how to immerse. Well, anybody could tell them how to immerse, and they should have learned how to immerse before they went. Or we can judge him favorably. We could say maybe some of the ladies haven't yet learned the laws properly, didn't learn them properly, and therefore, as they went in, he would notify them, look here, be careful of chatzitzot, be careful of intervening substances on your body, and make sure that when you immerse, nothing is intervening, it's completely just the naked body that goes in. Make the bracha and have these thoughts in mind, and he would instruct them exactly what to do. Rabbi Yochanan, on the other hand, didn't instruct anything. He simply waits outside, and when the ladies come out, the first thing that they see is, of course, Rabbi Yochanan. And as I said before, ideally, the first thing that the woman should see is something that's kosher. And in particular, if it's her husband, all the better, because this is the man that she loves. This is the man that she's going to conceive a child with. And therefore, we don't want anything else intervening. She shouldn't even look at anybody else along the way. She should be careful if she's catching a bus or something like that, not to look at anybody at the time. She should keep her attention focused on the mitzvah, which she's going to perform that evening together with her husband. And as a result, the first thing that she will see when she gets home is her husband. And that is the thought that she's going to have, that she wants also to have children who will be like her husband. If she loves her husband, she will want children to be like her husband also in the same way. So there's Rabbi Yochanan, he's sitting there, and he's got the story going that when the ladies come out, they're going to see him. Mistaklin B, they're going to look at me, and they will have beautiful offspring just like me. Omri le Rabbanan, so the rabbi said to him, look, Mr. Feimar, Me'ena Bisha, meaning you, the master, are you not afraid of the evil eye? Which means to say, if the ladies look at you and they see your beauty, or quite frankly, if anybody sees you behaving in this way, they're going to cast an evil eye on you. Say, well, look at that man over there. He thinks he's so such and such. And they will have an evil eye. Oh, he thinks he's so good looking. Oh, wow. And they'll say, therefore, people will cast an evil eye on him. Or, oh, he thinks so much that the ladies really want to have children just like he is. And all these different types of thoughts. This is casting an evil eye. Of course, we should not behave in this way. But the reality is that this is how people do behave. As soon as they see that there's somebody who is involved in a certain action, especially when it relates to goodness, kindness, holiness, people become very irritated. Oh, who is he to think that he's holier than thou? And so forth and so on and so forth. So they said to him, aren't you worried that maybe the Yetzer Hara is going to affect you? People will look at you in a bad light. They'll make comments, sniggering behind your back about the things that you're doing. Omalahu, he said to them, Ana mizara de Yosef ka asena. I come from the seed of Joseph. What does it mean? I come from the seed of Joseph. I am a descendant of Joseph. And the evil eye never ruled over Joseph. How do we know that? How do we know that Joseph was not affected ever by the evil eye? Because it's written, Ben Poras Yosef, Ben Poras Ale Ayin, which means Joseph is a fruit, a bountiful vine. And then it says it's a bountiful vine upon the spring. What does that mean exactly? For Omri, and for Omer Rabbi Abahu, and Rabbi Abahu said, Al Tikre Ale Ayin. Don't say that he is this bountiful vine upon the spring. Don't read it as upon the spring. Ela olei ayin. It means he's above the eye. Yosef HaTzadik was above the eye. We know that he was an exceptionally good-looking man. He was so good-looking, says the Chumash, that the ladies used to peer over the walls as he was going through, and there was a high wall. All the ladies would clamber up, and one would push the other one along to try and get a better look of the great king of Egypt, so to speak. He was the viceroy of Egypt at the time, and he was exceptionally good looking. So the ladies would all try and get their heads over the walls to take a look at this very good looking man. He himself was an exceptionally good looking man. And so therefore, but nevertheless, he was above the eye. Even though the eye looked at him in this way, the eye had no effect on him. Like for many other people, this is a concept in Yiddishkeit, whether or not we say it is real, whether or not we say it's not real, whether or not we say there are prayers to avoid it, or prayers, or that if one can do it to somebody else, all sorts of questions start coming up. But in general, there is a concept of this evil eye. And a person who is very good looking, for example, might have the evil eye cast upon him. A person who is very wealthy will have the evil eye cast upon him. A person who is very smart, is very clever, he might have the evil eye cast upon him. What does that mean? It means people are jealous. And when they see him, oh, he's so good looking. But really what they're saying to themselves is, it's not fair that he's so good looking, when in fact I'm not as good looking as he is. It shouldn't be that way. That's how people think. It's a nastiness. Or he's so wealthy. It shouldn't be that way. A certain type of nastiness that creeps up in people. He's so smart. Who does he think he is? It's a nastiness that comes up with people. This is the evil eye. So he's pointing out that he was a descendant of Joseph, and with Joseph, the evil eye had no effect. Rabbi Yosei, Rabbi Hanina Omar Mehacha, and Rabbi Yosei, the son of Rabbi Hanina, says that we learn out that the evil eye had no effect on him from here. What does it say? V'yidgu larov bekerev haaretz, and they shall. And this is referring, of course, to the Jacob's blessing of Joseph's sons of Ephraim and Manasseh, where it says, "The angel who redeems me from all evil shall bless the young, and in them my name be recalled, and the name of my fathers Abraham and Isaac." And then it says, "V'yidgu larov bekerev haaretz," and they should increase in abundance within the land. What does that mean? V'yidgu larov, they shall increase in abundance. The word v'yidgu, they should increase, has the root letters of dag, which refers to fish. Fish increase in abundance in the waters. Ma dagim shebayam mayim mechasim aleihem, just as it is that the fish in the sea, the waters cover them. Ve'ein ayin hara sholetet bahem, and there is no eye, there's no evil eye that rules upon them. Why does nobody look at the sharks and the fish and the squids and the oysters and the octopus? And why is it that people don't look at all of the animals in the sea in a negative way? People comment about the about animals and other things in the world all the time. Why are they commenting about these animals, but they don't comment all the time about the fish in the sea? And the answer is because the fish in the sea are hidden from our eyes, and anything that is hidden from the eye has the possibility of increasing in blessing. And for that reason, of course, we have a principle that wherever we're involved in anything of a nature of trying to succeed in something, we should do it in a way that is hidden from the eye. Because the moment we tell people our plans, people already give us the evil eye. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to start a business. It's going to be the next best thing about such and such. And I'm going to do, and I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do. And the next thing you know, he never does anything. And people say, well, why didn't he do anything? Well, sometimes the reason is because people put an evil eye on him. People say, he thinks he's going to do it. He can't do that. No chance he can do that. I won't let him. People talk about it negatively behind his back. This can have an effect on him. Whereas when a person is engaged in an endeavor and he wants to succeed in it, the best way to succeed is never tell people what you're doing. Wait until it's done. And when it's done, you can show them the results of what you did. Don't tell anybody what you're about to do. People are too jealous. People are too evil in that respect. They don't want you to see. They don't want to see that you succeed. It's a strange thing to say. We think that we live in a world that everybody wants our best. They're looking out for our best. But we know the truth. Most times when we engage in things and we become successful, people become very anti-us, become very negative. Suddenly we made a lot of money. The next thing you know, people come to us and they say, hand us all your money because you're successful. So you say to them, but I can't. I don't really have enough. It looks like I've got a lot, but I don't. Oh, now people hate you all of a sudden. And this is the nature of people. They don't want to see that other people succeed. Sometimes they don't even want to give people brachot. They can't even bring themselves to say, I wish you the best. I wish that you should be wealthy. I wish that you should get married. I wish that you should have children. People can't even bring themselves to this, let alone that when they see somebody successful, they can't simply say, well, you're successful. I'm really happy for you. By the way, you too are entitled to success. Meaning the person who says that, he too is entitled to success. Just because the other person is successful doesn't mean the other person cannot be successful. We're all entitled to success. We should all wish each other the success and enjoy the success of others. And of course, where a person does meet with success, he should, of course, be careful not to rub it in the face of the other person as if to say, oh, look how successful I am. Of course, when he does that, he, of course, will bring upon himself the Ayin Hara again. So there's a whole system that's going on over here. So with regards to the fish in the sea, since the water covers them, the Ayin Hara has no effect. And since the Ayin Hara has no effect because nobody can see the fish, and it has no effect on the fish. So this is exactly what he was talking about. And he was saying, let them increase in abundance upon the lands, referring to Menashe and Ephraim, so too we see that the seed of Joseph, there is no evil that rests, that rules over him. This is the nature. The bracha exists in this particular way, and he is not affected by the evil eye. And so Rabbi Yochanan, who is a direct descendant of Yosef, is not worried that people will see him sitting by the mikvah and they will come along and have a negative impression about what he's doing and cast aspersions on him and the evil eye about what he's doing. And the Gemara concludes with this. And if you like, say, in other words, I'll give you another proof, another way of seeing and understanding the concept of how it is that the Ayin Hara has no effect on the descendants of Yosef. And the reason is as follows. Ayin shelo ratzta lizon mima she'enu shelo, the eye that did not desire, that did not want to nourish itself from that was not his, ein Ayin Hara sholetet bo, the evil eye will not rule over him. What are we talking about, of course? We're talking about the story of Yosef and Potiphar's wife. And we know that Potiphar's wife was trying her best to seduce Yosef, but Yosef did not let his eye be deceived to look upon something that did not belong to him. What did not belong to him? His master's wife. And since he did not engage in staring at her and then taking things further, letting his eye seduce him into what was not really his, he was deserving that in the long run, not only he, but all of his descendants would have this blessing that the Ayin Hara would not be able to rule over him. And that is the story. And so that's what happened with Rabbi Yochanan. He was not worried about the evil eye resting upon him. I just want to go through all these notes here. I'm not sure where we got to last time, but I think that we might have got to about here where we said in tractate or katzin. We learned before, we were speaking about the idea of the miracles. Why is it that the miracles occurred to the previous generations and they didn't occur to them, to that generation? So when we were speaking about here the tractate or katzin in the previous lesson, I don't think I read this note, I'm just reading it to clarify that the halachot of ritual purity and impurity include numerous definitions with regard to what is considered part of the fruit or vegetables and what is considered ancillary to and not actually part of the fruit. This is dealt with over here in tractate Okatzin, the leaves, stem, peel, etc. In the Mishnayot in tractates Okatzim and Tarot that deal with this issue, much attention is paid to the distinctions between the various parts and why one is considered part of the fruit while the other is not. This constitutes one of the most intricate areas of halakhic discourse. And we were discussing over here in the story that how it was the different rabbis were discussing these laws, and the earlier rabbis, when they got over there, they said, well, that dealt with the discussions of Abaye and Rava, and the later generations. Let's just check what it was. We said over here that they would just say over here, it dealt, with the disputes between Rav and Shmuel, and the later generations, when they came along, so they would learn out 13 versions of Okatzim. And it wasn't fair that the later generations were learning so much more than the earlier generations. How could it be that the earlier generations had miracles performed for them? Remove one of his shoes. We learned before that the story was that Rabbi Yehuda would remove one of his shoes, Rabbi Yehuda, and as soon as he removed his shoe, when they were praying for rain, the moment he took off his shoe, at that point in time, the rains would come down. He never had to do anything more than that. So it is prohibited to wear shoes on a public fast proclaimed due to drought. As soon as Rabbi Yehuda began his preparations for the fast, removing one of his shoes, the rain immediately began to fall. And so we see over here that the earlier generations, they didn't even have to do anything. The moment that they even, you see, he removed his shoe in preparation for the whole fast day and everything, immediately the rains came down. And we said that the reason that this happened is because the earlier generations were deserving because of their self-sacrifice. They were willing to do a lot more for God in terms of self-sacrifice than people are today. Today we take life easy. We're not really willing to give up so much of our life for the sake of God. We're more interested in what we need to do to accomplish our lifestyle and all the work that we need to involve in. And somebody says, but you should give up a little bit for God's sake. Not for God's sake, for God's sake. Give up a little bit of your life and do what? No, it's okay. I'm studying lots of Torah. To me, I study a fortune of Torah, more so than the rabbis of previous generations. I have access to more texts. I'm smarter than they are. I can come up with all sorts of questions and answers they never came up with. I'm so smart. But the previous generations, never mind smart or not smart, they were willing to give up their essence and their lives in everything that they did in order to serve God. We learned over here that a garment made of a forbidden mixture of wool and linen, the karbalta, this is the story that he saw this lady walking in the marketplace and she was wearing this karbalta. Some say that this is a red garment, which is considered immodest, and that is why Rav Ada ripped it off her. According to Rashi, who explains that it is an expensive garment, it is inappropriate to walk in public dressed in such finery without wearing an outer layer to cover it. A big principle in the laws of modesty that in the nature of a Jew, he doesn't walk around in particularly expensive garments. Of course, to walk around in neat garments, to look smart, to look clean, all of these things are vital. And all the more so a person who's a Torah scholar should walk around in clean garments all the time, and he should be wearing fine garments. But there is still a difference between fine garments and the latest fashion. The latest fashion are those type of garments that only the wealthiest of the wealthy wear. And so therefore, if you want to fit into their crowds, you too will wear such garments. It's a type of garments that many people wear like once only in their lives, or twice or three times. It's like you only wear it once. God forbid that anybody should see you in that garment again. So that is the type of way that people live even today, unfortunately. And many people, of course, in the world don't have anything. And there are many people in the world who buy garments in abundance. They have their walk-in wardrobe and they will wear a garment just once in their lifetime. And then afterwards, nobody should see me in that garment ever again. God forbid that they should think that I've worn the same garment twice in my lifetime. Well, this is the type of thing we're talking about. It doesn't behoove a Bas Yisrael, a Jewish woman, to walk around in these splendorous garments as much as it doesn't behoove a Torah scholar to walk around in exceptionally expensive garments either. But to walk around in neat garments, to walk around in attractive garments, in respectful garments, and people look at one and they say, there goes a Torah scholar. Look how beautifully he dresses. He looks neat. He looks tidy. He looks presentable, etc. Of course, this is a Kiddush Hashem, and that is the right way to go, but one doesn't have to overdo it. And that is what happened in the story. The rabbi was going down. He saw this lady walking around in this type of garment, which is reserved only for the wealthiest of the wealthy. And he said, this is not appropriate for a Bas Yisrael. And then he made a mistake. Of course, she wasn't even Jewish. Not being Jewish, she's entitled to wear whatever she wants to. She's not part of this modest type of a lifestyle that a daughter of the Jewish people should heed to and follow in that particular direction. Now, we continue over here. We finished off the section now dealing with that last Mishnah, and we continue on to the next Mishnah. Masnisin, this is our Mishnah over here. Nashim ve'avadim uketanim. Women, servants, and young children, those who are under the age of bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah, peturin mikriyat shema. They are exempt from reciting the kriyat shema. These three categories of people are exempt from reciting the kriyat shema. Let's take a look on notes over here, the halacha. the obligation of women to recite Shema. What is a woman's obligation in terms of reciting Shema? Listen to this. Women are exempt from reciting Shema and the accompanying blessings, says the Mishnah Berurah. They are not even obligated to do so by rabbinic law. There are those who rule that women are obligated to recite the first verse of Shema because it includes acceptance of the yoke of heaven. Practically speaking, ladies don't have to say the Kriyat Shema every day. Why? We're going to see over there, of course, what the reason is. The obligation of minors to recite the Shema. The commentaries disagree whether the minors mentioned in the Mishnah as exempt from reciting Shema are only those who have not yet reached the age of training to fulfill mitzvahs, or whether even those who reach that age are exempt. One should adopt the custom that a child who reached the age of training to fulfill mitzvahs recites Shema, in accordance with the opinion of Rabbeinu Tam. Brought down in the Shulchan Aruch or Rechaim, you can go check it out yourself. So basically, at this point in time, Nashim v'avadim u'ketanim paturim mikriyat Shema, they're exempt from reciting the Kriyat Shema. We move now to Daf Chaf Amud Beis, that's 20, side B. Umina Tefillin. All of these people, women, servants, and the young boys, in this case, are exempt from Tefillin. V'chayavim b'tefillah, but they are all obligated in prayer. They must pray every day. Mezuzah, they must put mezuzahs on their doors. Even a lady, if she is renting out a room by herself, whatever it is, or she lives in a house, an apartment by herself, she must have mezuzahs on her doors, just like men do. There's no difference here. And in the mitzvah of benching, on making the blessings after one eats bread. All of these people are obligated in these matters of these mitzvahs over here, Tefillah, Mezuzah, and Birkat HaMazon. The Gemara continues. Kriyat Shema, reading the Kriyat Shema. Shita, the Gemara says, well, that's obvious. I know that all of these people would be exempt from reciting the Kriyat Shema. How do I know that? Mitzvahs aseh she'azman gramahu, because it is a positive mitzvah which is bound by time. For all mitzvahs aseh she'azman grama, nashim paturot. And all positive mitzvahs that are time-bound mitzvahs, women are exempt. A great principle in the Torah. Somebody wants to know, a woman wants to know, is she obligated in the mitzvah or is she exempt? If it is a positive mitzvah and it is bound by time, then women are exempt. Therefore, when it came to Kriyat Shema, isn't it true that there is a mitzvah to recite the Kriyat Shema, as we have discussed before in our Shiurim together? We must recite the Kriyat Shema when we lie down, and we must recite the Kriyat Shema when we get up. Therefore, Kriyat Shema is a positive mitzvah. You shall do it. Morning and evening, evening and morning, bound by time. Therefore, women are exempt. Ma'od, what would you say? Literally, what would you say? In other words, what would you say? What is your understanding of it? Then you translate it colloquially. You might say, Ho'il ve'ispa malchus, since there is in it the idea of malchut shamayim, of the yoke, of accepting the yoke of the kingdom of heaven, Kamash Malan, comes to teach us? No. Which means to say, this is so important. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Hear Israel, Hashem our God, Hashem is one. This is what's called accepting Kabbalat, all Malchut Shamayim, accepting the yoke of the kingdom of heaven. Now, accepting the yoke of the kingdom of heaven is no small matter. Therefore, both men and women should certainly be obligated. The Gemara says, Kamashma lan, comes to tell us, that's not really the case. Really, women are exempt. So even though we started off and said Pshita, it's obvious that women are exempt because it's a time-bound positive mitzvah. Nevertheless, it's not so simple because the mitzvah of Kriyat Shema is something very unique in that it involves the kingdom of heaven. The Gemara continues. Umina tefillin, women are also exempt from tefillin. Shita. Oh, that's obvious, says the Gemara. Ma'odetema. What would you say? That's the literal translation. Ma'odetema, colloquially, you might say, Ho'il ve'iskash iskash lemezuzah, since it is that it is comparable to the mezuzah, therefore she would of course have to put tefillin on. Kamashmalan comes to teach us, no, that is not the case, and women are in fact exempt from tefillin. Well, what are you talking about over here that we're comparing it to the mezuzah? If we go back to the Mishnah again, we said over here that women are obligated in tefillah, they're also obligated in mezuzah, and they're also obligated in birkat hamazon. So we might say, if women are obligated in the mitzvah of mezuzah, therefore they should also be obligated in the mitzvah of tefillin. Nevertheless, we say that is not true. Even though they are obligated in mezuzah, they are not obligated in tefillin. But you might have made a comparison. You might have said such a thing. Let us take a look at the notes here. Those exempt from the mitzvah of phylacteries are pturim in tefillin. Those who are exempt from the mitzvah of tefillin. Women and slaves are exempt from phylacteries. If women want to assume astringency and don phylacteries, they should be rebuked, says the Rambam. Very interesting. Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch bring down over here that those women who are going to put tefillin on, even though they really could put tefillin on, I mean, the only reason that we're saying that they can't put tefillin on is because it's a positive mitzvah bound by time. But nevertheless, we know that women do certain mitzvahs, and they're also positive mitzvahs bound by time, as we'll discuss later, things like shofar, for example, or lulav. On the lulav nesrog, it's also a positive mitzvah bound by time, and women have accepted those things. Therefore, there should be no reason that women can't put tefillin on either. Nevertheless, the halakha says, according to the Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch, that women who do put tefillin on are unfortunately doing something that should be avoided, and in this particular instance, it should be rebuked. It's not correct for them to do, even though there are other mitzvahs that women do, which are positive mitzvahs bound by time, and they are totally normal and accepted. This particular mitzvah takes on an extra measure of arrogance, basically, by saying, I too am going to fulfill this mitzvah, even though really there is no obligation whatsoever. Let us be clear. There are many mitzvahs that a woman can do and involve herself in. She can light her Shabbos candles, and then she can keep Shabbos just like everybody else. And she can learn all the halachot of Shabbos. She can keep kosher like everybody else. And she can learn all the laws of kashrut. She can fulfill the laws of family purity just like everybody else. And she can involve herself and go into great depth to make sure she's fulfilling them correctly. Once she's, of course, fulfilling all these laws to the greatest degree possible, and she has so much yirat shamayim for these things, well, maybe afterwards we could talk a little bit about this concept of tefillin. But we often find that the same ladies who are wearing the tefillin and showing everybody, look at me, everybody, I'm also putting on tefillin, very often lack even the understanding of how to put the tefillin on. They may even wear tefillin that are not kosher, not having paid attention to the laws involved of what is considered kosher tefillin and what not. And let alone all of these things, are they paying as much attention to the laws of Shabbos, kashrut, family purity, charity, studying Torah, and all the laws involved in that? Are they paying as much attention to that as they are to tefillin? Well, if they are, we can talk about them a little bit. But if they're not, then what is the reason that they're wearing a tefillin? It's a sign of arrogance. All that they want to really do is to say, look at me, everybody. I am wearing tefillin just like the men do, and there's no reason that I can't. And of course, as we see over here, there is no reason that they can't, except for the fact that the Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch say, if they do it, they should be rebuked. It is not correct. Those obligated in prayer, hachayavim b'tefillah, everyone is obligated to pray, even women and slaves, in accordance with the Mishnah. And it is a mitzvah to train minors to pray. Some rule that women fulfill their obligation by means of reciting an entreaty once daily. Listen to that. Many ladies ask about the obligation of prayer. As we see over here, brought down by the Rambam in the Shulchan Aruch also, we see it clearly in these various sources as brought down. The obligation of a woman to pray on the most simple level is simply to recite one prayer a day. And as we see over here, it is not even necessarily the Shemoneh Esrei. It can just be a simple prayer. God, please help me to keep kosher. God, please help me to be wealthy so that I can afford to live. God, please help my family, that we should all be healthy and happy. Any of these things is also considered a prayer. And if a woman does this, she is fulfilling her obligation of prayer each day. In the opinion of the Rambam, that is their obligation to pray by Torah law. Those obligated in the mitzvah of Mezuzah, everyone, including women and slaves, is obligated to affix a Mezuzah to his doorways. Even minors are trained to affix a Mezuzah to their doorways. Everybody must fulfill the mitzvah of Mezuzah, which is a very big mitzvah. As I just said before, if the ladies really want to put on Tefillin, well, before they begin with the mitzvah of Tefillin, let's start off with the mitzvah of Mezuzah. First thing to make sure about is that the mezuzahs that are purchased are of the highest possible standard to make certain that they are absolutely kosher. Know who you are buying your mezuzah from. Make sure that it is of the highest standard that you can afford at least and is absolutely kosher. No questions asked about it. There should be no discussion. It shouldn't be the type of mezuzah that was photocopied, God forbid, or who knows what else was done to it, and the person wants to just simply put it up onto his on his doorpost in order to show that he's got a mezuzah. And meanwhile, he spent 300 shekels buying the casing of the mezuzah, but he didn't want to pay too much for the mezuzah scroll because he asked them in the shop, "Can I have just a simple mezuzah?" So they gave him a simple mezuzah. It was, God forbid, photocopied onto a piece of paper. And the main thing, of course, is that you've got a beautiful cover. No, what we're talking about here is fulfilling the mitzvot as we need to. So when we've progressed and we've done mezuzah correctly and we're giving charity as much as we should, and we're keeping the mitzvahs of kashrut and family purity and Shabbos, and how many mitzvahs must we count? Pesach and matzahs. Let's fulfill these mitzvahs to the highest degree possible. So many mitzvahs out there. Why is it that the ladies have to jump onto the bandwagon of Tefillin when there are so many other mitzvahs? And what did we learn before? Didn't we learn in our shiur today, at the beginning of the shiur, that bracha ultimately rests on those things that are hidden from the eye, or the opposite, those things that are revealed externally create an Yetzer Hara, which means to say that very often this can happen as well. The ladies are putting on tefillin, they are no doubt going to attract to themselves also this Yetzer Hara, where people will look, at a glance, they say, what exactly is that lady trying to prove? And at that point in time, there is an Yetzer Hara that is put upon her. Why put oneself out there in that position when it is the nature of the Jew, and especially the Bas Yisrael, Kol Kavuda Bas Melech Pnima, all of the glory of the daughter of the king is inside. The glory of a Jewish daughter of Israel is inside. Inside where? Inside her house, of course. Modest. Nobody really knows of her greatness. Many times, for example, many people know of who the great rabbis are. They say, there was this great rabbi, Baba Sali, or there was this great Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, or there was a great rabbi, Yosef Chaim of Baghdad. And you say to them, can you tell me a little bit about their wives? And very often people say, I don't know much about their wives at all. Sometimes they don't even know what the wives' names were. Why? Because the answer is because the beauty of the woman is not external. She is internal. Everything about her is her grace within the palace. She is a modest lady. And of course, she can be outside in the world as well, achieving goals and whatever. But the nature of the lady is to be modest within Judaism, not to be external, flaunting what the Judaism is. Of course, she can give shiurim, and she's giving the shiurim on YouTube, and she's giving the shiurim in public, and she must give the shiurim. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about when the lady goes out extra and she behaves in a manner that is not appropriate for a Jewish woman. Tefillin, of course, as we said before, was brought down as being that problematic mitzvah. Let us take all these lessons to heart, value them, internalize them. We can question them, we can discuss them, but let us value what these mitzvahs and these lessons are telling us. Now, those obligated in the mitzvah of grace after meals, as I said before, it seems to be, who is it that is obligated? Who is it exempt? Women are obligated to recite grace after meals in accordance with the Mishnah, and it is a mitzvah to instruct minors to do so as well. Answer: everybody must bench after eating bread. So let's again go back to the story. Here is another mitzvah for the ladies: bench after eating. Say brachot, of course, before eating. Learn all the halachot of brachot. See how many laws there are to learn. It wasn't just Shabbos and kashrut. It wasn't just family purity and charity. It wasn't just Pesach and matzahs, etc. It is also the mitzvah of Mezuzah, and it is also the mitzvah of the Birkat HaMazon, and all the mitzvahs that pertain to the laws of blessings as well. Let us not forget how many mitzvahs a woman can do and should do, and which sanctify God's name and praise what it means really to be a Bas Yisrael. Woman's obligation in prayer. Notes, this question is based on a more fundamental dilemma. Is prayer a mitzvah by Torah or by rabbinic law? According to the opinion that it is rabbinic, the language of the Gemara, like a time-bound positive mitzvah, is problematic. On the other hand, even those who hold that the basic mitzvah of prayer is by Torah law assert that the mitzvah of turning to God is by Torah law, while the formula and the times for prayer are by rabbinic law. Therefore, it is possible for women to fulfill the mitzvah of prayer by means of any request addressed to God. What a wonderful law that we're learning over here. Many people are ignorant of this law. Many ladies think that what it's about is davening 3 times a day, etc., etc. That is, if a woman has the time to daven, and if she delights in the davening, if she can concentrate on the davening, and she's enjoying the davening, by all means, daven 3 times a day. But what is the essential mitzvah? So the woman, for the most part, would be preoccupied with activities that are going on in the home. Usually, of course, we don't want to make stereotypes over here. We don't want to say men work and women deal with the house. Men lift up heavy objects and women do the ironing, or whatever the stereotype is that we come along and make a definition of a particular person, man, woman, etc. But rather, what we're talking about here is that in general, it is the nature of women to take care of the home. She's making sure everything in the home is organized. The home is really her palace, even more than the man's palace. He just simply lives there, basically. She takes care of things. And of course, in terms of bringing up the children, for the most part, will fall out on the obligation of the woman, while the man is usually out and working, etc. Again, no stereotypes here. I don't want to mention that the woman didn't go out and she didn't work, but in general, the woman will be more focused on bringing up the children and making sure that everything is attended to, their garments are attended to, and the food is taken care of. Usually, the women are involved in that to a greater extent than the men, and because they are involved in that, that is exactly why they're exempt from all these mitzvahs. Because if they were also obligated in the same mitzvahs, in other words, these positive time-bound mitzvahs, just like men are, they would never have time to deal with the homely activities. As a result of that, who would take care of the home? The men would be doing all the mitzvahs, and the women would be doing all the mitzvahs, and the home, of course, will be unattended. So therefore, there is a leniency for the woman to engage in the home activities. She is the home. And while the men are out doing whatever it is that they're doing, they're working, they're studying, whatever it is, they're at a kollel perhaps, the women are taking care of the family, and they might find themselves frustrated. I've got 3 prayers to daven and whatnot. I've got to put my tefillin on and whatnot. No, we don't have to put tefillin on, of course, and we don't have to daven. The women don't have to daven 3 times a day. Even a simple prayer in one's own language is acceptable for a woman. We can listen well to the words of Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, who taught that meditation, the highest level of connecting with God, is in fact speaking to God in the language that one understands and giving of oneself for an hour a day, half an hour a day, 20 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day, whatever a person can manage to do, just simply talking to God in one's own language that one understands. The women are certainly no different to this. On the contrary, perhaps they can reach even higher levels where they can spend their time involved in that without having to distract themselves from 3 Shemoneh Esreis and the brachas before the Shema and the brachas and then the Shema and all the different things that go on with it, which are only additional things. Those who have time, feel free to engage in it. Those who are enjoying it, those who can put kavanah into it, fantastic, enjoy it. But in terms of what is the raw obligation, it is simply a prayer recited even in one's own language and whatever the prayer may be. Now the Gemara continues. The Gemara says that the ladies are obligated in prayer. Why? Because prayer relates to the aspect of mercy, which means to say everybody needs mercy, therefore everybody has to pray. Ma'udatema, you might say, or what would you say? What would your question be? What is your insight to the whole matter, the problematic part of it? You might say, Ho'il uksiv ba, since it is that it's written about it, Erev, Vavoker, V'Tohorayim, As we know that we read even in the Modim prayer, in Shemoneh Esrei, we say evening, morning, and afternoon. We say that that's the time that we pray, evening, morning, and afternoon. That this is comparable, dameh, to a positive mitzvah, which is time bound. Therefore, since it's a positive mitzvah and it's bound by time, therefore, women should be exempt from prayer. Yet we said in the Mishnah that women are obligated in prayer. The Gemara answers, Kamash Malan, comes to teach us. That is exactly the point. The Mishnah is bringing that to us. In case we come along with this proof saying that they're exempt because of this reason, we say to them that's not true. They are still obligated to pray. How come? Because the Rachamei Ninhu. Because prayer relates to mercy. Everybody needs the mercy of God, man or woman, and therefore everybody must pray to God during the day, at least once a day. If we're talking about ladies, at least once a day, even if it's a simple request, please, God, help me. Whatever it may be, it's acceptable. We all need mercy. Over Mezuzah. Next case is the Mezuzah. Women are obligated in Mezuzah also. Pshita. The Gemara says that's obvious. Everybody knows that the women must have mezuzahs on their doors also. So the Gemara asks, well, what would you have thought? You might have thought, why would women be exempt from mezuzah? Since it comes about and it's compared to the study of Torah, comes to teach us, no, they are obligated in mezuzah, even though they're not obligated in the study of Torah. Where are they obligated where do we say, where do you make this comparison about mezuzah being related to the study of Torah? Take a look here on the side, on the notes here. Lest you say, since the mitzvah of mezuzah is juxtaposed in the Torah to the mitzvah of Torah study, meaning to say in Devarim, in chapter 11, verses 19 and 20, there we're saying the mitzvah of both Torah study together with mezuzah. It seems to be just as women are exempt from Torah study, so too they're exempt from the mitzvah of mezuzah. Therefore, the Mishnah explicitly teaches us that they are obligated. That's why we needed the words of the Mishnah, because you might have thought, that's the language of the Gemara, you, who's ever reading this text, might have thought that since the mezuzah appears in the Torah next to the mitzvah of Talmud Torah, therefore, since the women are exempt from Talmud Torah, so therefore they're exempt from mezuzah also, kamash malan. So the Mishnah comes to teach us, no, the women must, of course, have a mezuzah on their doors also. And in benching, women are obligated to thank God when they finish their food. Pshita. This is obvious, says the Gemara. Of course, everybody should thank God for the food that they've eaten. Ma'odetaima. The Gemara asks again, well, what would you think? What would your reasoning be? Because you might think, Ho'il, since it is, ukasiv, and it's written, and since it's written, when Hashem will give to you in the evening meat to eat and bread in the morning to satiate yourself, meaning this is coming from Parshas Beshalach, as we know, we just recently read it now, that God is going to bring the quail to the Jewish people when they're wandering in the desert. He's going to bring the quail in the evening, and then afterwards there's going to be bread in the morning, meaning the man, to satiate themselves. Therefore, what? It seems to be that there's an evening and there's a morning. Evening and a morning, that refers to time. Therefore, kamitzas asay sheazman grama dame. Therefore, maybe benching relates to a positive mitzvah bound by time. When is time? God gives food in the evening and he gives food in the morning. We eat in the evening, we eat in the morning. So it seems to be it's a mitzvah that is dependent upon time. And therefore, women will be exempt. Therefore, the Gemara says, kamash malan. The Gemara says, comes to teach us. No, that is exactly why we mentioned this in the Mishnah, because it is coming to add that even though you might have thought that the ladies are exempt, really the ladies are indeed obligated in benching and must thank God when they've finished their bread meal. Thank you very much for joining me. We've reached the end of this shiur. I'm Eliyahu Shir from Chesed Ve'emet. My site can be found at www.lovingkindness.co. If you've enjoyed this shiur, please show your appreciation and help me by liking the video, by clicking on the thumbs up button below. please make a comment, a discussion, whatever you want to do, a question that also helps me. And I know that you're listening in, enjoying it, gaining something from it. I appreciate those responses. It makes a difference in my life. It might seem that it doesn't make a difference. It makes a big difference. And it also helps my channel to grow. I'm trying to reach as many subscribers as I can. And by you commenting and interacting, sharing the video with family and friends, you are helping me to expand this channel and expand the teachings that I'm involved in, so that I may continue in my own learning and my teaching with your help. Those of you who wish to, feel free to contact me directly through my website with any questions about Torah, life, and growth. I'd be happy to discuss any matters on your mind. Let's discuss it. Let's feel it. Let's experience it together. The mistakes that we make, the growth that we go through together. Let us all work through these journeys together and succeed together. For those of you who can, please come through to my site and to become a member of the site by making a monthly contribution and helping me so that I can continue to give out these videos at no cost and be able to teach even more, which is really what I would like to do. But I need your help. So please come onto the team of Chesed Ve'emet by coming to the site and becoming a monthly member. The more you can help me, the more I'm able to give over to others. For those of you who wish to, feel free to join me for another shiur, private shiur in any subject of your choice in Torah, a book of your choice. I'd be happy to learn with you. I also teach Sofrut, so if you'd like to learn how to write a Mezuzah, I'd be delighted to teach you this wonderful craft and all the beautiful halachot that are involved in learning how to become a sofer. For those of you who would like to learn more about the laws of family purity, I'm involved in teaching young men who are about to marry and those who would like to refresh themselves with the laws of family purity, which is the laws of niddah, relating to the woman's menstrual cycle and the times that the couple can be together and the times that they separate from each other. So please feel free to contact me and I'd be delighted to teach you about these laws. My wife is involved in teaching the kalot, the ladies, and I'm involved in teaching the men. So together we're a great team and we'd like to share these laws with you. Please book our services, support us, and help us to progress in all the activities that we're involved in. Thanks again for joining me. I hope that you enjoyed this shiur. I look forward to another shiur in the near future, and I wish you everything of the best. Shalom, shalom. Bye-bye.